Hi, Misha here, and we've done quite a few videos on real-world aircraft lately. At least a couple of videos, but many hours. But when new things come in from, well, formerly Eaglemoss, now Master Replicas, I always like to do videos. And this one actually excites me. In the past, we got the Scimitar, Shingen's ship from Star Trek Nemesis. Okay, Nemesis. There was a lot of potential there for a decent popcorn flick. It still wasn't the worst thing ever, in my opinion. But, yeah, it suffered from directing and editing and writing, whatever. There were still elements I liked about it, including the Romulans. The Romulans have always kind of been my favorite alien race. Nothing against the Klingons or the Borg. They have their place, too. But to be fair, the Romulans were the first major alien species we met in TOS. And their couple of episodes were just good. Balance of Terror, Enterprise Incident. Just have a soft spot for them. So we got the Scimitar a long time ago as a special. And we had most all of the Romulan fleet, except for one noteworthy exception, and it wasn't even a background ship. It was actually a briefly hero ship, or fighter, or attack flyer, as I've seen it called. The Scorpion. And Eaglemoss had just announced these. They were going to make the tooling and come out with them, but long before they even posted them, I think for pre-order, they went out of business. So it looked like we would never get our Scorpion. But of course, Master Replicas bought their existing stock. Still no word if they're going to be doing new ships or just selling off existing ones. And yeah, they announced these. This one took a little bit longer to get. I think about 2 or 3 weeks. It took a little bit longer to ship in August. Probably people were on vacation. But I got it in. And this now completes my Romulan/Reman fleet. So I will be doing a big fleet video because, I like doing those. But I thought, let's just focus up on this itself. See how they did with this little model. I'm always a little nervous on these larger scale ones like the shuttles. Yeah. So we'll see how the last of the Romulan ships fared with Eaglemoss and talk about its in-universe and real-world history. Why not? Let's nerd out. And as always, if you could, please like, share, and subscribe. And there's a Mishaco Patreon if you'd like to toss a buck. Or not, that's cool too. Just as a brief refresher, we'll put the Scimitar, Shingen's command ship, flagship. This was huge, nearly 900 meters long, over 1,300 meters wingspan, although again, a lot of that wing was wing. 52 disruptors, 27 plasma torpedoes, you know the deal, cloak and Theron, all that. Crew of up to 3,000, including troops, which honestly, compared to a Warbird, isn't that huge, but it's enough. And it had about 40 of the Scorpion fighters on board, which would make sense for a large craft like this. Even though it was maneuverable and had high warp for its size, having kind of defensive craft or even inspection craft or just patrol craft on board would make sense from a certain perspective. So it kind of operated as a aircraft carrier in space. The design was made by John Eaves, and it does harken back to some Jim Hadar stuff. And in canon, this design was started during the Dominion War to kind of challenge the large-scale Jim Hadar battle cruiser and even battleship, but it wasn't completed by the time of the end of the war, and the half-finished hull was just kind of stowed on Remus, which is how Shingen and his folks got a hold of it. And even though this was the prototype by the 25th century, these were built in small, limited numbers to be used as mobile bases and frankly just signs of rank. And Eaglemoss, for their credit, did a good job with this. Like I said, this was in the small, well, I said that wrong, the special scale. There is the normal, there's the XL. This was the middle one, which is probably my favorite scale. The large is maybe a little too large. The little ones are okay sometimes, but this is a good size, kind of like the Battlestar Galactica. Because of all this detailing, it's kind of light. The wings are plastic, the metal is in the middle here. It's got decent weight to it, but it's one of the ones you pick up and it feels a little lighter than you'd expect. But then again, yeah. So that's the large ship, and the Romulans were kind of doing the large ship thing with the warbirds, but we had seen smaller vessels all the way back in Deep Space Nine. From one of the best episodes of that series, even of Star Trek in general, Pale Moonlight, we have the Romulan long-range shuttle, or Romulan attack shuttle. This was the Senator, it's a trap shuttle. And interestingly, this was, I think, the last pure practical model used in Star Trek before they went to CGI fully. They've been dabbling with CGI for years, but this was the last, practical. And we saw it. Essentially, this is a Romulan runabout, about 24 meters long. Pretty good warp drive. It has up to 6 disruptor cannon, a micro torpedo launcher or 2, cloaking device, shielding. It could carry 2 to 3 dignitaries plus a crew, or up to 24 troops. So it was kind of a multi-purpose craft. But it was made in more or less peacetime, before the war. And while these were used in the war to deliver troops, this was kind of I was going to say helicopter, but that's not really long range. It's just a little big. It didn't have quite the maneuverability and firepower, but it does show a small scale vessel. I think it's one of the neatest Romulan designs. It definitely looks Romulan, but it also looks kind of like a runabout. And I'm glad that Eaglemoss gave us this one a long time ago. We'll talk more about it when we do a big fleet video, but I just wanted to point out that the Scorpion isn't out of place. We've already seen these small scale, and you would find some of these on board warbirds, and even the Scimitar, I think, had about a dozen. Fewer would fit on a warbird, but this was pretty standard issue before the war. But for the wartime, they quickly discovered they needed something a little different, a little more flexible. Thus, the Scorpion. Designed relatively quickly because it's quite small, and this is the 24th century, so fabrication, computers, advanced. Although we know now the Romulans don't really care much for AI. We first see this in Nemesis, the year 2379. However, since that time, lore has been that it was developed around 2374-75 for the Dominion War, to kind of be smaller than the Dominion's Jem'Hadar attack ships, and also capable of outflying the larger ships' guns and targeting, and just kind of developing a defensive screen for the large warbirds, and being cheap and disposable too, because they were often piloted by Remans, which were considered disposable shock troops. Although Romulans would fly them too, they would just stick Remans in here. So disposable ships, disposable people, kind of running that. They had both offense and defense capabilities. They could be mass-produced with replicators. And we continue on for a long time. It's always interesting when Star Trek does fighters, but we see the Federation fighter. We've seen some small-scale Klingon ships and things, so they pop up in Star Trek more than you might realize, even though it's more of a medium to large-scale ships. Not large-scale like Star Wars, but yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah, the Scimitar, big for the Star Trek universe, would be rather small in the Star Wars if you think about it. But I digress. Like I said, I wanted this to complete the fleet, sure. But this wasn't just a little background ship, which kind of amazes me that they took so long to do it at Eaglemoss. After all, the shuttle we just looked at was just pretty briefly in an episode. I mean, it was well seen. It wasn't a smudge on the background, but this was pretty prominently featured. Data and Picard find it on St. John's ship, and pilot it for a couple of scenes. We see it getting beamed out. Yeah, it gets a decent amount of up-close screen time, and it's one of those few ships we actually see inside of, at least what's there. So, for 5-6 minutes of the film, it's kind of prominently featured. And it's strange that they did several blink and you'll miss it background ships, but we're just at the very, very end, a decade after starting the series, doing the Scorpion, even after doing the Scimitar. You'd think once they did the Scimitar, they'd do its ship. Either way, it was a kind of very noticeable hole. So, with that, like I said, made in the Dominion War, we see the Remans using it in Nemesis, and further on, these continue to be used by Romulans and Remans on multiple sides after the explosion of the star and into the 25th century. It's the primary fighter attack craft, small-scale vessel that they use. And there's a few different versions and variants as well. So it's a pretty standard feature. Kind of ends up being, I don't want to say like their F-16 because that's a little big and multi-role. This is a smaller thing than that, but they found a lot of uses for it. So what are the specs? Overall length, about 7 meters. So you're looking at about 3 times shorter than the shuttle, even less. It does have basic shielding and basic hull armor, but not a whole lot. It mostly uses high maneuverability for defense. For offense, by standard, we have a disruptor cannon up here and a turret with some flexibility. It's also saying that some could be fitted with a micro plasma torpedo launcher, but that doesn't seem to be standard equipment. And otherwise, yeah, that's what we got. Kind of downturn wings. It's capable of maneuverability and high impulse, but is standard, not warp. And because of that, it doesn't use a singularity. It uses matter-antimatter reaction. We have a somewhat long but quite narrow cockpit. 2 seats. Pilot is in the front. Co-pilot, gunner, weapons officer, or even just a passenger is in the rear. So it could serve as an extremely light transport. I guess this kind of reminds me of like a Cobra attack helicopter. I'm not going to say Apache, but it's like a Cobra, just lean, no holds barred strike craft. It was designed to operate from a myriad of places. A carrier, sure, space station, but also it could operate in an atmosphere, and it could even operate taking off from a planet base, and it could even be independent, at least as long as its fuel/power source allowed. So it's like some of the smaller Starfleet shuttles in that sense. They operate for a while, but without warp drive, you're not going to get too far too fast. And these are, of course, designed to operate in fleets, in squadrons, not independently. But they make good little patrol craft to go out there. They did have a sensor suite and all that. Some versions are said to have a type of cloaking device, especially the quote-unquote elite version, later featured. Some are even said to have some limited warp capability later on, as warp technology is further microed in the 25th century. But like I said, these kind of Romulus's and Remus's primary fighter. So what about the model from Eaglemoss / Master Replicas itself? Well, it sits on the stand very well, clips onto the back on the wings. Not too tight, not too loose, though. It hasn't fallen off yet. It's your typical Eaglemoss stand with your number on the bottom for whatever that's worth to anyone. I rarely, if ever, ask anyone what my numbers are because it's just a little sticker, but I guess it's part of the collector's thing. Let's move this aside. So So here this is. And at first, like I said, I'm a little wary of small-scale craft. Like a lot of the Starfleet shuttles just have the blacked-out windows. Happy to say this has the clear canopy. You can see inside, hopefully. I have no idea what's in there. I guess I could crack open the canopy, but it's glued, of course. So I would imagine, based on how Eaglemoss has done other things like the Battlestar Galactica, there's a basic seat in there. Well, 2 seats. But they don't go too crazy on the controls. Of course, these are Hollywood sets anyway. But yeah, you can let me know what you see inside there. But I was happy they didn't just make this all black, because that would be ugly even to me. But they took the time to give it this. Eaglemoss would do that occasionally. The Work Bee comes to mind. A couple of the Discovery ships, like the Pod. But for the most part, yeah, the small, or the large-scale ones, I should say, are blacked-out windows. But to be fair, the studio models were often that, too. But this had to be built so that actors could interact with it. That's why it's a simple design without a lot of protruding stuff. It's more than just your box you'd get on a TV show, because it was a movie budget. But still, they had to design it with practical reasons in mind. They couldn't just go pure CGI. I guess they could, but they didn't. So they let Data and Picard interact with it. The Scimitar was designed by John Eaves. I don't know if he also designed the Scorpion, or maybe someone working on his team did. It does flow, like the lines, the curves, the turret especially. It does look like it's from the same design bureau as the large scale, which is neat. We have a large engine in the back, and I like that it's kind of an ovular shape for the impulse. And it's actually heavier than you'd think. I said the Scimitar is a little lighter. This is all metal. That is. The turret is plastic. That's to be expected. And of course the canopy is, unless we have transparent aluminum now, Scotty. And a little odd for them, even the bottom is metal. This is solid. It's actually a true die cast. So, yeah, I'm actually impressed. I don't know how they could have really done this better, frankly. So, yeah, it does have some good weight to it. And it actually does sit on its skids, if you will. Fine. So, no, I like it. It doesn't feel like they cheaped out on it. And they could have very easily put it in a shuttle, I can't talk, set. You know, the last set they did release was alien ships that had the Ferengi and the Xindi and the Vulcan in it. And the Klingon. They could have easily just made this one of them. But no, they gave it a little extra love. Which is good, because they did it for the shuttle as well. And since I mentioned it, here's that shuttle. Of course, they're not to scale with each other, but they are roughly the same size. This is a little more narrow. This one's actually slightly lighter. Again, this is solid metal. This is mostly metal too, except for the nacelles, but this is all metal in the center. It's wider, a little more air in there. The noses kind of match up with each other, I think. To me, it looks like the same thing. What color is this, by the way? But no, I like it. I really do. I was going to always get it just to kind of complete my fleet, in for a penny at this point. And again, if you only let me pick one alien race, I have to think hard between Klingon and Romulan. I still like Romulan the most, but Klingons are so iconic for Star Trek. But if I could pick two, definitely those would be the two. Now, of course, we do have some new Romulan ships from Strange New Worlds we haven't acquired, except one. It'll be interesting if Master Replicas or someone else picks those up, because I really want the Romulan fleet from the end of Season 1. but we'll have to just see if we do. But from classic, 80s, 90s, 2000s era Star Trek, at least we can say we've got them all here. So let me know what you think. Do you like the design? Yeah or nay? And even if you don't like it, do you think they translated it well into diecast? By the way, the edges are actually patterned. There's a physical pattern here, not just paint. Or maybe you don't like the design, but you like how they did it, or vice versa. Yeah, let me know what you think. I think they did about as good as they could. The only downside to the Master Replica ones, probably because they didn't create them, there's no magazines that come with them. They come in the standard nice kind of late style box with the outer packaging, but no little magazine. So, and I've noticed that across the board with all the Master Replicas. Maybe someone else bought them, or maybe they just never got around to printing them. Anyway, guys, like I said, I'll do a full Romulan video at some juncture, but I wanted to give this credit since yeah. With that, this is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.